Alien Romulus is a great throwback to the original film that we'd been waiting for from the Alien franchise for decades now. Alien is one of my all-time favorite film franchise, and always has been. Even with me viewing half the franchise mostly unfavorably, I still find myself enjoying almost every single one of the films, even the ones I don't like. And I can say that thankfully Romulus does what I expect and have wanted from an Alien film for a while now. After the release of the game Alien Isolation, I knew that the formula for the original Alien film was still extremely effective, and that of course being trap some unfortunate space people on a spaceship with a xenomorph, with of course the xenomorph picking off people one by one throughout the film. It's a simple yet effective premise that the Alien franchise has been avoiding for over 30 years now. The last film in the franchise that actually tried to pull off the same feelings that the original film worked with was Alien 3, but it was greatly held back by the studio meddling to the point that it became a shell of its former glory. And honestly, I was quite surprised that Ridley Scott actually let someone else direct an Alien film again after Resurrections, as after that film he seemed to have been safeguarding the franchise for decades due to just how poorly that film flopped. Even though an argument could be made for Aliens being the best film in the franchise, which wasn't made by Scott but instead by an early James Cameron, although I am not one of those people. That is not me saying I dislike the Aliens film. I think that it's just not as good as the original. I think it's a great action film. I just don't think it hits the same level as the original film does. And I was really wondering which route the film was going to go in, as the franchise seems to find itself in two lanes, either an all-out action gore fest like Aliens, Resurrection, and Covenant, or the slower horror route of Alien, Alien 3, and Prometheus. And it was somewhat interesting to see that this film found itself somewhere in the middle. For Covenant, it seemed to be almost trying to find that in the middle, but the action sequences were just way too over the top and goofy to be taken seriously in any sort of way, and the poor dialogue made the scary scenes so overdramatic, which removed any possibility of the horror scenes actually being frightening. And this film almost seemed to follow the footsteps of Prey, which I also thoroughly enjoyed, where instead of trying to be this innovative, crazy new movie, it looked at what made the original film so beloved and tried to do something in the same vein. Honestly, I've been noticing that a lot more with sequels as of recently, with many of them using the exact same story beats of the ones in the franchise before them, but changing just enough to keep the story different and interesting to watch. I know Twisters earlier this year also followed that same formula, as it was almost to the point where it was a strange remake of the original, where it used almost every single story beat of the original to a T. But I digress. So what did I enjoy about Alien Romulus, with of course not spoiling what happens in the film? First off, the atmosphere in the film, while not on par with the original, is still leagues better than anything else in the franchise thus far. It got really close to the nail-biting atmosphere that characterized the original to this day, but drawing out the horror sequences as long as possible, letting us know that they are in extreme danger, but they have no clue just how fucked they actually are. It also has the extremely dark coloring of the original, finally replicating the dark work of H.R. Giger again with the interior of the ship, in a similar vein to how Alien Isolation did, as the ship just feels slightly off. Like you really shouldn't be there in the first place. I would compare it to the exploration of the Norwegian base in The Thing, where we can tell that something truly horrible has happened here and that they don't realize the level of mistake they have made by entering into the ship. It really just is nice to see how much they built out this world. It feels like a real place, which is really great for a sci-fi film. World building in sci-fi is extremely important, as it really makes it so even if you are seeing something completely fantastical, that you still believe in the world that you are seeing, which this film does a very great job at doing. Everything we see in this film makes sense for the world that it is set in. And that really takes talent to do, as a lot of films aren't able to do that, and I think that's really great to see that the film is actually able to bring that back from the original film. And the sets in this film are just dark, in a very literal way. Everything inside is black, where it allows the alien to conceal itself, making it so that you think that the alien could honestly be anywhere, even on the walls directly behind them. The film also expands on things that we hadn't seen in previous films, such as to what the middle stage of the alien looks like in between the pneumorph and the xenomorph stage, allowing us to see the full life cycle of the xenomorph. That is not a spoiler, by the way, that is in the trailer. And speaking of the xenomorph, they look better than ever within this film. You can really tell the level of detail they went to making the xenomorph come to life, as it's obvious that the mixture of practical and CGI effects that Alvarez insisted on truly worked. And while some of the CGI doesn't work in parts, which we will get to later, the vast majority of the CGI within the film is strong and really shows the movie magic that the Alien franchise has held on to for so long. Then there's the scares themselves, which for the vast majority of them are of course jump scares, which normally would upset me to no end, as there isn't anything I hate more in a horror film than the overusage of jump scares. But in all honesty, almost every single one of the jump scares in the film felt deserved and fairly well set up. the exact opposite I had for films such as Five Nights at Freddy's, where every single jump scare felt forced and unnecessary, where it seemed to be just put in there just to make sure the audience didn't fall asleep up to that point. Every jump scare besides some early on felt like they flowed well into the film, not just being placed at random intervals for people to react to and call the film the scariest ever made. And the jump scares were all a part of a moving sequence of a greater scare as a whole. There wasn't a lot of fake out jump scares to keep people on their toes. Instead, jump scares were added to already tense situations as a way to make the tensity of the film blow up in your face with one big scare. Another film that did this style of jump scare well was actually the original, especially the sequence where Dallas is being chased by the alien in the air vents. Instead of the jump scare being used as a crutch for making the scene scary, the jump scare is instead used at the very end of the sequence that already had extreme tension due to Dallas being followed by the xenomorph on radar. The film uses a very similar style to its jump scares while still maintaining itself as a different film from the others. See, this film has Fede Alvarez's style written all over it, with him directing the Evil Dead remake and Don't Breathe, which you can see a lot of similarities to here. Like a lot of his other films, this uses a lot of gross out visuals to show how bad of a situation they are in, so if you are squeamish, this film is definitely not for you in any sort of way. There is tons of violent gore in this film, and it deserves its R rating by far. It also has his trademark tension, as Alvarez knows how to shoot a tense scene better than a lot of horror directors can, with every single scene in the ship feeling like they don't belong there in any way. He is excellent at keeping you on your toes throughout, make it seem like that something could drop in and kill one of the characters at any given moment, with the acting of the characters being quite good. And I was surprised to find out that a lot of them didn't have a lot of other credits under their name. I thought Kaylee Spaney and David Johnson both did excellent jobs as co-stars, and you really feel like the bond between them in many scenes goes quite deep, despite one of them being an android. Once again, not a spoiler, part of the trailers. You would know if you saw it. Visually, the film is also spectacular, with the cinematography and colors really popping in many scenes. While not on the same level as stuff like this year's Longlegs, it still definitely stands out more than a lot of the other horror films of the past few years. But the film still has some flaws that I want to address, so let's get on with those. First off, the CGI of the android. If you've seen the film, you know which one I am talking about, but without spoiling, there's an android in the film that is one of the goofiest looks I've seen in a while for a CGI film. Giving the actor the CGI is portraying a massive case of baby face to the point where it completely caught me off guard and almost made me laugh when I first saw it. It could have easily been saved by using some of the darker lighting that the rest of the film also uses, or only using the silhouette like they did when the character is first revealed. But because of the bad CGI, it really stands out from the rest of the CGI in the film, as this effect is just so laughable. To put it in perspective, it's almost like they are dropping a PS1 texture inside of The Last of Us 2. It just doesn't work. Then of course there's the ending, which compared to the rest of the film is a bit over the top and overdrawn, as it just seems to go on for 5 minutes too long and suffers because of it. While the new monster idea is cool, I think we just saw too much of it to actually be frightened, with once again, I think darker shadows and less lighting could have made the monster that much more ominous in the final product that we got. And the very last flaw I had with the film is that while it went back to the roots of what made the franchise just so great in the first place, I just don't think it changed enough to fully give itself its own identity. Parts of it almost felt like just straight up remakes of scenes from Alien and Aliens, when while it was nice to see a combination of the two, it made the film somewhat lack its own true identity. And I know I've been saying that a lot the past few weeks, but it really is important. I think that finding your own identity within your film can really make or break what you are creating, is what makes me want to watch this film over Alien or Aliens. Films which I think do the same elements better than this film is able to pull off at all. The film is almost the opposite of Prometheus, which I think changed too much. This changed almost too little. It doesn't feel like the film really wants to pull any punches, and instead just settles in for trying to be a new version of the original Alien film. But I do think that the film does just enough to keep itself interesting and worth watching, but it still just doesn't change enough. But with all that being said, how would I actually rate the film overall? Well, due to the excellent visuals, interesting story, a nice throwback to the original, giving fans what they want, I want to give it a higher score, but due to the drawbacks such as the identity crisis the film seems to have in parts, and the film dragging on a little too long, I can't give it a super high rating that I might want to give it. But I think finding a happy medium between the two is what I'm going to do, and this is going to be my first range score, as I think upon rewatches my score of the film could greatly change from what it was before. And with all that being said, I would give the film between a 7.5 to 8 out of 10. Nothing more, nothing less. And with all that being said, make sure that if you like this film to click that like button and subscribe for more weekly uploads on anything horror, and I will see you all next week.